doing a stand-up routine. And if you don't do that well, they're not going to pay much attention to you. And since my subject basically is a lecture, it's really important that I keep it interesting. So I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me pass these things around and try not to break them yourselves. This one will pretty much illustrate what the point of them is. I showed them this, and I say, have you seen these things? Anybody who's seen houses being built? This is a scissor truss that's being built, okay? And the main thing we talk about with trusses is stability, right? So we remove one triangle, and the whole thing falls apart. So they learn about triangles and stuff like that, and then they pretty much trash these things. So I'm going to pass these around, if you guys could just move on down. And this, of course, two kids have worn it around their neck. But, whoops, this is to show that an arch bridge is the same thing as the parabolic shape of a suspension bridge. Okay. It also shows that the suspension bridge cable is flexible and the arch is not. And I'll tell you about that in a little bit. So pass this around as well. And they're really fascinated to know that the cables on a major suspension bridge that might be 2 and 3 feet in diameter are really made up of thousands of 1/8 inch diameter wires. Okay? And they're grouped in strands such as this. So once again, pass that around. So what I do, and I think what we're going to do here is just do a little bit of my 5th week of the 6th week. So basically I'm doing a lecture course. There's really very little else I can do. I try to make it as interesting for them as I can. This was an answer to a question that one of the kids had of how do you anchor a girder to a post. So here, what I generally do is I say we're going to build a bridge. It's going to go from west town to east town. And we have to establish where we put it. We go through the whole criteria as to why it goes, where it goes, you know, the access of the roads on either side, the subsurface conditions, the narrowness of the river. Then we look at the various types of bridges. This is a beam and girder bridge, which basically, as you can see, it can handle a very heavy load. But the problem is you've got these piers in the river, which the navigation interests don't really like. So beam and girder bridges are not used pretty much for long spans. We talk about truss bridges, like that thing you're passing around. And I explained to them that one of the reasons that truss bridges are great, they're very strong, they can handle railroad traffic, etc. and so forth, but in order to build them, you have to put all this stuff in here. This stuff's called false work. I explained to them that this is basically the definition of overhead. The guy who you're building the bridge for has to pay for it, never gets to use it, okay, because the bridge will not support itself until it's completed. And then we go to now this is interesting. I just got done making a documentary film about this bridge. This is the Poughkeepsie Bridge, Poughkeepsie Railroad Bridge, which was built in 1889, and it was taken out of use in 1974, but it's just recently been put back in use as something called Walkway over the Hudson, which is a kind of like a rails to trails thing. So I show them this. This is a truss bridge, and you'll notice there's 4 piers in the river here. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we show them this. This is the Mid-Hudson Bridge, which is a suspension bridge. And you can see the Poughkeepsie Railroad Bridge upriver a little bit, but this one only has 2 piers in the river. So we talk about the ability of a suspension bridge to handle a much longer span. This is the Hellgate Bridge. I should have got arrested for taking this picture because you're not supposed to take pictures from the Tri-Borough Bridge, but I did anyway. Okay. And we explained to them that the problem with an arch bridge is just like with a truss bridge. It's got a lot of advantages. It will take a very heavy load. It can give you a really big span. It's great for railroads because it's very stiff. But the problem is, just like with a truss bridge, until it's completed, it won't support its own load. So you have to go through all kinds of stuff like this. You see these tiebacks here? Okay, these are that's good. Until that center connection that those 2 derricks are doing right now, until that's made, this thing will not stand up by itself. So again, there's all your overhead. Okay. This bridge is still being used, by the way. And then here's the Verrazano Bridge. This one annoys me. I took this with my cell phone. I've got a couple of Nikons at home that cost me $4 grand, and they don't take pictures as good. I don't understand. okay, this is what our final bridge is going to look like, and establishing the air line, which is the line of the bridge. We'll go through this kind of quick. Borings and soundings are extremely important because you got to know what you've got down below to take the incredible load that these bridges. The bridge that we design in class has a total load dead and live of 45,000 tons. So we have to talk about where you're going to put that load. So you have to do the borings and soundings. I showed them these pictures. They all agree they've seen this as they're riding around with their moms and dads. And that because we're doing this in the river, we have to probably do our borings and soundings from a barge or a ship. Final surveys, we have to locate exactly where the anchorages and the towers go. And the point here, and this is not necessarily just for the kids, it's just for all of us, this is being done in the river. These dimensions have got to be exact because all the pieces of that bridge are being made, I always use the expression, some little old guy in greasy overalls someplace is making all the pictures and all the pieces that go into that bridge. And if these things are not located exactly where they're shown on the drawings, the pieces the guy is making ain't going to fit. And there's no way to fix that in the field. So we stress the importance of proper layout. Tower foundations, here's our problem. We got a river which is, I don't know how deep it is. We got a river, we got a riverbed which is all bushy stuff, you can't put anything on it. And here's the good stuff. So how do we do this? How do you get the load, how do we build that? It's in the water. Now, back in the old days before OSHA, this is how the Brooklyn Bridge was built. The stuff I show in yellow, that's timber. These caissons were built in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. They were floated into the proper position at the East River, locked in place with this, which is called a Kohr dam, which can only go when you want it to go. And then, for $1 a day, guys went down in there and literally dug the bottom out, while up above, people were piling granite blocks on top of it. So what they're literally doing with picks and shovels and whatever, they're digging out the bottom of that river to get down to where that foundation line is, which we established with our borings and soundings before. And this is what it looked like down there. We explained to them that there was no electric light, there was no cell phones, no telephones, no diesel engines. This was all done with steam power and horses, okay? And the thing you have to remember is, as this thing is going down deeper, the water pressure is getting higher. You don't want the water coming in here, because that wouldn't do anybody any good. So you keep increasing the air pressure inside, until at some point they had between 3 and 4 atmospheres of pressure down there, and nobody understood about the bends at the time. So guys would finish their shift, get in the airlock, come on up, go to the saloon, and die. About 15 or 16 people died of what was called caisson disease at the time. And you guys know that that's when the nitrogen bubbles come out of your blood too fast. The designer of the bridge, or the son of the designer of the bridge, Washington Roebling himself, almost died from caisson disease, working in the New York caisson, 70 feet below the river, surface of the river. There is a myth that Washington Roebling never walked on the Brooklyn Bridge, but that's not true. He did. He's an old man. And here's some more pictures of the way it was. There's the airlock, the top left. And again, the working conditions probably weren't all that great. $3 a day for non-Italians, $1 a day for Italians. We're not going to do that. We're going to build our Kohr dam this way. We're going to make steel pipe caissons. I know they look like beer cans, but that was the best I could do. We're going to put our bridge, the one we're designing in our class with the kids, we're going to build our foundations by using caissons. We're going to lock them in place with the Kohr dam, and here's what we're going to do. If it's 72 feet from the river surface to where the good stuff is, we can found this stuff. We're going to place the first caisson, first steel tube, right where it's supposed to go. And then we're going to use a clamshell. We're going to start digging out the bottom. And as we dig out the bottom, it starts to sink. And the water starts filling up inside. You keep doing it until we get down to the, you call it bedrock, but it's not. The Brooklyn Bridge, for example, was founded on gravel on both sides. Okay? And then what we do, because concrete is heavier than water, the construction term is a tremie. This concrete is heavier than water. Once we get the caisson, the steel pipe, down to the bottom where we want it to be, we start pumping concrete in, and that forces the water out. And eventually, and by the way, I showed them that yes, you can pump concrete. Okay, most people don't think of that, but you can pump concrete just like you can pump water. And we talk about the fact that concrete is not, does anybody here believe that concrete dries out? Yes, no? It doesn't. The concrete absorbs the water. The water goes into the crystallization. Everybody ever feel cement? You know, it's very fun, like talcum powder. Those are little crystals. And they absorb the water, and as they get bigger and bigger, they start to lock all the aggregate together. You don't ever want concrete to dry out. Okay, so concrete's heavier than water. We're pumping the concrete in, the water's coming out. And at the end of the day, we have the entire caisson filled with concrete. We have a solid foundation all the way to bedrock. Okay, we do that 9 times. This is the actual foundation of the Verrazano Bridge, so you can see that this is exactly how that was done. I don't think anybody could get anybody to go down in a pneumatic caisson anymore. Certainly not for $1 a day. And let's see, so we put a cap on top of it, and then we have our 2 tower foundations and our anchorages, and then we talk about, how much more time do I have, John?
4 minutes.
4 minutes, okay. So the anchorages, their function is basically to take the tension in the cables. In a suspension bridge, all that vertical load is converted into tension in those cables, and here's what I do, and they love this. This is the one hands-on thing we do. I go to Home Depot and I buy a bunch of dowel sticks and I cut them up to this length and everybody gets one. And I say, okay, try to pull it apart. Put tension on it. Pull it as hard as you can. Can you break it? No. These are 5th graders. Okay, now take it and push on it as hard as you can. Can you crush it? No. And then I say to them, okay, break it. They all do that. And that's bending. Bending is the worst way to use material. Stress multiplier. So the reason a suspension bridge works as well as it does is because all that 45,000 tons of load goes into the cables in the form of tension, and the function of these jobs here, okay, is to take and just use gravity to resist the pull. You see the cables coming into it on the top. Okay, that's the function of the anchorage, to take that thrust. And here's the Verrazano Bridge with all the individual strands going into the anchorage. And there's our bridge, how we're going to do it. And then we erect the towers. This is interesting. I asked them, Brooklyn Bridge, this is the Brooklyn Bridge Tower being built. And there's probably still guys digging down underneath this one. That's the Brooklyn Tower, this is the Manhattan Tower. I asked them, why is this stone? This was the last stone tower bridge built. Why? You remember, the Brooklyn Bridge was the very first bridge to use steel. Up until that time, it was cast iron and wrought iron. The Brooklyn Bridge used steel, which was revolutionary, but they stayed with stone. The reason for that, they were used to it. They knew what it did. You know, there's a difference between science and engineering. Scientists make theories. Engineers go to jail when stuff doesn't work. I'm a licensed professional engineer. You know what that means? If I screw up, I can be criminally charged, as opposed to somebody who's not. Okay, so that's an interesting point about the towers. Let me show them some other towers. The Manhattan Bridge Tower is being built about 20 years later. There's the Manhattan Bridge Tower without any cables. Golden Gate Bridge, Verrazano Bridge in New York. Oh, this is interesting. Because the Verrazano Bridge has such a long span of over 4,000 feet, they actually had to take into account the curvature of the earth. So the tops of the towers on the Verrazano Bridge are 1 5/8 inches further apart than the bottoms, from the curvature of the earth. And I think that's about it. I mean, believe me, I could do this all night. But anyway, that's what I do. Thank you.
So do you build model bridges at all with the students?
Oh yeah, no, the students don't. I do. I got a 8-foot-long model of a suspension bridge over at Laurel Ridge right now. The kids are very respectful of it. They've only wrecked it a little bit. Yes, ma'am.
So how do you tailor something like this for kindergartners versus fifth graders?
What we did for kindergarten was I have a 6-year-old granddaughter, and my daughter told me, look, if you're going to deal with kids, you got to do Dora the Explorer. So what we did was we took the troll, because the school, if you recall, the school was dealing with Billy Goat's Gruff. So I made a whole thing, again, lecture, I had a whole thing of the Billy Goats on one side, and there was a bridge, and there was a troll under the bridge, and the bridge got washed out, so I used Photoshop, I took the bridge out, but I kept the troll, and then the question was, how do we get the goats across? Then they came up with jetpacks and zip lines, and what's amazing, go on, Google jetpack goat, you're going to find a picture of a goat with a jetpack. Okay. And yeah, basically we did that, and then we decided maybe we ought to build a bridge, okay? But we certainly didn't get into this level of detail. And then for my 3rd week, again, as you know, I built 15 or 30 little truss bridges, kind of like that big one I passed around, but these were little, made out of popsicle sticks. And I had 3 consecutive classes. The first class totally destroyed them. So I'm sitting out in the hallway putting them back together again, waiting for the second class, which I just barely did. By the time I got to the 3rd class, I had a Starbucks bag full of rubber bands and broken sticks. And the 3rd class seemed to enjoy that as much as But basically, you know, we got the concept of the function of a bridge is to get somebody from one side of the other to the other. So that's what we did. Yes, ma'am.
So would you say that there's a certain age that...
A little louder.
Would you say that there's a certain age that this is more successful with, or all ages is this?
No, I think what I do here, the presentation I just did, I don't think it's going to work much more in 5th grade, to tell you the truth. The first time I did it over at Pine Spring, after 3 weeks, I asked the teacher, do you think I'm going over their heads? And she said, yeah, maybe you are. But then the beginning of the 4th week, I said, okay, tell me what you learned. And they could kick back a lot. One thing I want to mention, I think somebody else has alluded to this too. When we were doing that thing, the thing that you could wear around your neck, that arch bridge thing, when I was doing this over at Camelot, we're talking about the fact that a suspension bridge cables are flexible and they can move, whereas an arch bridge is rigid and can't. So we're talking about what happens when the train is going across the bridge and the load is not uniform. There's one kid, I could see it in his face. He had intuited a concept called local deflections, which is a graduate level concept in structural engineering in elastic theory. He didn't have the math, he didn't have the words, but he intuited the fact that the arch bridge was going to have to somehow do something different. And I thought that was amazing. Yes, sir.
Tom, thanks for sharing your expertise and materials. You obviously put a lot of time crafting those. Just wanted to ask you 2 questions. First, when you do the field trip portion of the program, do you actually take the kids to a bridge?
I'd love to, but the schools have said no.
Yeah, I bet.
So when I taught at Nova, I used to take my structures class to the Arizona Avenue Bridge on the canal right up in Fletcher's Boathouse, and they loved it, but the school kind of put the kibosh on that. I'd love to do it, but the school don't want to do it.
No, that's great. Second was, you said that the only hands-on portion was the part where they snap the dowel.
Yeah.
And you still manage to keep the kids' attention throughout this lecture series? I mean, it's a pretty cool way of...
Yeah, I don't know about your other ones. The one I saw was basically this presentation expanded in more detail. But what I liked about it is we all need to do lectures sometime in our, even though we focus on hands-on. But the graphics, the video, everybody sees the Galloping Gertie Bridge.
Yeah, we've got that too.
You know, the kids were enraptured by this presentation, I found.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But again, so if we're trying to get kids enthused about science, you just don't want to stand up there and be a talking head because you're going to lose them real fast. But if you put something like this together, you can get some lecture in there.
I'll tell you, I've had some amazing feedback from kids who've told me, like when I went back to Laurel Ridge this term, I'd been there in the spring, and I've had kids from my previous class come up and say, I want to be an engineer.
Wow.
So,
That's the kind of
like I say, I mean, again, it's maybe not very modest, but I think I do a good stand-up. And I think that's the only thing I can think to do with this subject. I mean, I can't push buttons and bell rings. I can't do that with this subject. So it's got to be a lecture. And, you know, when I taught nights at Nova, I used to say the thing to do is to talk loud, keep moving, and tell dirty jokes, which you can't do with the grades.
But that's where the teacher can come in, because I know for the kindergartners, they were trying to tie it to a project-based learning thing where at the end they can build their own bridge of some kind, or tie it into geometry, or, you know, so I think that that's a good way to also have the teacher build on the task to actually make, for the hands-on portion, of actually doing something out of it.
Okay, one more question or comment, and then we'll move.
Yeah, actually, we didn't do it last year, but we had a bridge building experiment with third graders, actually. I was kind of surprised that it worked with third graders. I don't know that much about third graders, but you learn. We had toothpick bridges. We talked about very briefly a couple different types of bridges, had a little display, but we just focused on the truss bridges. And what we did was we had a bunch of toothpicks, of course, and we had different materials they could choose from. We had gumdrops, starburst, and some sort of caramel of some sort, still in the wrapper. And they would choose how to build it, and then they'd get groups of maybe 2 or 3 students each, and they would each then choose which material they wanted, and they put a bridge together, and we would test how many books. We would put them between a span. And they noticed that, some materials they chose didn't work as well as others. So we ended up with 2 classes, like the ones that did the gumdrops were able to hold 3 books, and the ones that used the starburst could hold like 8 books, or something like that.
Yeah,
but that's one possibility
yeah.
in the future.
Well, what I did do this term, and I said, all right, just take home 2 sheets of construction paper, make a bridge. And what I did was cut one of them in half and make 2 cylinders, and then take the other one and fold it so it had deep ridges, and that would support stuff. But what I got was a lot of kids who took 2 pieces of paper and made suspension bridges out of them. Okay, but look, I mean, it's a conscious decision on my part that I'd really rather, if I can keep their attention, which I seem to be able to do. I'd rather just hit them with as much of this stuff. And what I'm getting back is, like, I'll come in and they'll say, we went to Ocean City last week, and I saw a suspension bridge and a couple of truss bridges, and so to me, that's cool. And when you see the light bulb goes on over their head, that's what makes it all work out.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Tom.
Professor Kohr. Sherri Kohr is our classroom skills advisor. Went to Kenyon College in Ohio, taught at George Mason University, taught education students how to lead hands-on science in the classroom. I always told her if every education department did that, there would be no need for reset. But there is, I think, because very few are doing it. And so Professor Kohr is available to visit your classroom, make observations, and provide suggestions. She's done my class, and it's very helpful. So keep that in mind. Just contact me or Sherri, and let us know when you're doing an experiment, and if Sherri's available, then she will do that. So Sherri has a handout, which each of you should have in front of you. Thank you.
It just says create a suitcase of routines. I'm going to backwards just 2 steps. One of my jobs before I started teaching at George Mason, I taught K through 8 science at a Jewish day school in Fairfax, Virginia called Gesher. And in Hebrew, Gesher that's the Hebrew word for bridge. And one of my last years teaching there, every year we did a science fair or something. And one year our whole thing was about Gesherim, or bridges. And I have a whole curriculum for bridges, for K through 8, hands-on activities. So if anybody's interested in trying to get some ideas, your presentation works great because you're working with some older kids, and your graphics are amazing. And if I was an old woman, I might want to become an engineer now because your graphics are great. And I say that after writing all these curriculums and then looking at your graphics, I just learned a ton. So that was, it was big kudos. Anyway, now why I'm up here. As John said, I am a lover of teaching, a lover of science, and a lover of kids. And so I'm very lucky, and then I got to put all those things together in helping adults and teachers teach science to students. And so I can be a resource to each and all of you, if you'd like, by coming into your classroom, helping you come up with experiments to do, ideas of what to teach, working with your classroom teacher to come up with what experiments would emphasize what she or he is already teaching in the classroom, that kind of thing. And at all of these workshops, I try to give you some pointers, some ideas of things that you can do in your classrooms that might be helpful. And this time, I thought I would just give you a few ideas that probably you can use with no matter what you're teaching. Some of us are lucky enough to have lots of help in the classroom, and some of us are not as lucky and it's just us. And so the more you have in your back pocket, the more tricks that you have in your suitcase, the more likely you're going to feel successful in the classroom because you always have something that you can pull upon to get kids' attention back, move things along, etc. So I just thought I would quickly go over 5 routines that have worked for me that might work for you. One thing that I like to do is something called a mind warm-up. So some of you walk into a classroom where the kids are already seated. Some of us have kids come to us. I always find that transition is sometimes difficult. So a lot of times I'll take whatever I taught the last time and make up 2 or 3 sentences about it, put it up on the blackboard with a lot of mistakes in it. She's wearing a black dress. Well, the kids come in, they read it, and they want to find my mistakes really fast. But it's always about whatever I taught the last class. I tell them to sit down, find the number of mistakes, and then hold up the number of fingers for the number of mistakes that they found. So this can all be done quietly. It doesn't get loud, it doesn't get chaotic. And the kids will come in, they'll read the 2 sentences about whatever we did last week, and they'll hold up however many fingers they think the mistakes they found. I'll call on somebody, they'll tell me one of the mistakes they found. They get a kick out of the fact that the teacher makes mistakes. And how cool is that they could find the mistakes that I put up on the board? It helps remind them about what we did last week. It gets them seated and focused on the topic quickly. And you start out the class with the kids feeling successful because they found out that what you wrote down, where the errors were. So that's something called a mind warm-up. Anything that you can think of to get them to recall what they did last week and to get them into the mood for what you're doing now. Tom said that, he's a great stand-up comic. I think 95% of teaching is being a stand-up comedian, entertainer. Never stand still while you're teaching. I'm having a rough time now because I find it very hard to stand still. So moving around the classroom is always good. At the workshop we did last week, I did a little dance for everybody and went home and my foot was killing me. So I'm not doing that for you guys this time. But even if you, I think last time it was just about getting kids' attention. Even if you do something silly, like start doing jumping jacks in front of the classroom, kids are going to go, that's not normally what happens in my classroom, and they're going to stop and they're going to pay attention. You can't do that all the time, but every once in a while you can do something silly like that to just get their attention. A lot of teachers use, clapping routines. I'm not much of a clapper, but every once in a while I'll bring in a kazoo. Or if you take those duck boat tours in Washington, they give you really good quacker things that make great sounds. That's how I get the kids' attention. And I try to use a different one every time I teach, because then they're novel and the kids find them interesting. But any kind of movement, or I saw a teacher teach once. She had a little song that she made up, that she sang every single time she wanted to get their attention. And I don't remember the words, sorry. But it was, it was very clever. It was cute. If you like music and you like to sing, great idea. Another thing I like to do is, especially, I know we're running late, so I'm not going to do it now, but I would make all of you stand up and wave your hands and something to get a 7th inning stretch. We've been sitting here forever. There you go. And it's hard for adults to sit. It's hard for kids to sit. So anything that you can do to get the kids up and moving, I think can be helpful. Another routine that I like to throw into my classes is something called quick shares. Asking kids to talk to their partner and say, come up with a question that we can suggest to your teacher to put on the next quiz about what we learned today. And then they'll talk about it, lets them review what we learned. They love to make up test questions for the teacher, and it gets them to work in partnership. I don't remember which presenter said it, but I think it was you, Harold, when you have a lot of kids asking questions and you're the only one in the group. You can do something called just doing quick share. Ask the kids to help each other. You guys can't get your bulb to light? Oh, look, that table has their bulb lit. Walk over there and let them help you. See what they can show you. So that you're getting because that's what scientists and engineers do. We share, we communicate, we share results. We have to be able to collaborate. You're teaching those skills to your students as much as whatever the content area is that you're teaching. So quick sharing is, it's a good tool for you as a teacher. It gives you a little bit of a help. It's also a great tool for your students to get them used to talking to each other and looking to each other for answers, not always just to the teacher. As fun as I am, and as humorous as I am, I run a really, really tight ship when I teach, and I recommend that each of you do as well. Never talk unless there is total silence in the room. Never try to talk over students. You have to have their complete attention before you begin speaking. And I think that sometimes we as educators get a little uncomfortable with the silence, but honestly, 40 years of experience, if you stand there and don't say one word, the kids will quiet down, I promise. They'll tell each other to quiet down, the teacher's standing there. The worst thing that you really can do is try to talk over your students. You won't be successful. I know a kindergarten teacher at work, but this works with older kids as well, always starts her class, and whenever she's trying to get their attention, she always holds up 5 fingers. 5 eyes on me, 5 eyes on me, 2 eyes, your 2 knee eyes, and your heart eye, all on me, 5 eyes on me. And she just says that over and over and over again, and the kids, it's cute, the kids get it, and when she does it, it's a routine that she has set up, and the kids know exactly what that means. Something like that may not work for you as an educator, but if you can come up with a routine that you consistently use, the kids will figure that out. And then the last one that I have today is, it's really important to just mix up your teaching styles. I kudos to somebody that can just do lecture. I would find that difficult. But moving around is really good. I always say that it's very difficult to keep students' attention if the entire lesson is teacher focused. They're having to listen to you all the time. As much as you can of the learning that you can put back into their hands, the better off you're going to be, and the more successful you're going to be, as well as the more successful the kids are going to be. Another one that I like to do is I'll have, if I want to review what I've been teaching, I'll tell all the kids to stand up. How many of you got the light bulb to light? Sit down. They all sit down. Okay, everybody stand up again. How many of you found that you were able to, to build a parallel circuit with only 3 wires? Stand up. Again, you're reviewing, they're moving, they're up and down, and you're gonna have more success because they're not sitting. And then another simple thing that's really easy to do is just leave blanks in what you're saying. So for instance, I really thank you for your attention. Does anybody have any?
Questions?
Oh, questions, good job. And that's it. So that's just another technique. That's all I have to share. Any questions?
One
Sure.
comment and a question. The lectures. I find that kids, and again, we're talking 5th graders,
Right.
they really seem to appreciate being treated as adults as opposed to kids.
I agree.
When I call on somebody, I always say yes ma'am or yes sir, and I'm constantly asking them for feedback. Have you seen this? Have you, again, I think it's a matter of getting their attention by getting them really involved in what you're talking about, as opposed to just hitting them with facts and hoping they remember it. One of the greatest things that's happened is that kids are saying, we went to Ocean City and I saw a suspension bridge, I saw a trust bridge. And I've asked them, come in to me next week and tell me what you saw. So again, I think the concept of treating them like adults as opposed to school kids.
I think that works for children as young as 5 years old and up. And you have to know your audience. I don't think what you do would work with kindergartners. I think we have to make it more interactive with kindergartners. This is way too complicated, obviously. But I don't think that we could sit and expect a kindergarten class, for instance, to sit and listen to us for more than 3 or 4 minutes at a time.
Except if you got a goat with a
Well, it's so funny that you said the 3 billy goats gruff, because my whole kindergarten bridge thing was about 3 billy goats gruff, and the bridges that the kids made to get those goats from one side to the other was awesome, awesome. So you need to know your audience.
So do you have this as a resource somewhere with, some of the ideas that you outlined?
I don't really have anything written up. John has I videotaped several of these talks, and they're on the Reset website.
YouTube site.
On the YouTube site for Reset, so you can watch some of the ones that I've already done. And as I said at the beginning, a lot of times it's very hard to do these kinds of workshops sometimes because every teacher has individual needs and concerns. I'm available to come and watch you teach, and then we can talk about very specific things that will work for you, what works for your style, what works for your subject, what works for your classroom environment, etc. So mostly what I'm throwing out are just my experiences and techniques that I've sort of built up over the years.
In terms of running a tight ship, one thing that John has mentioned in the past that we rely on very heavily, and it's worked very well for us, is relying on the teachers for the handling the discipline. If we need something to say, we just look over at them and they do whatever they normally do. That's what the kids know. They react to it immediately, and we have their undivided attention.
Right, and that's the way that Reset is intended to work, and the classroom teacher is required to stay with you in the classroom. So again, if there's an issue, then that's somebody, John or I can help you negotiate that if we have a teacher that isn't there doing what he or she needs to do. But hopefully you're all in situations where the teachers are there supporting you and assisting.
So we have some support staff. I think our model is a little different than everyone else's. We deal with entire classes at the same time.
You have huge groups. The time I've watched
I
you
have
teach,
50
huge.
or 60 students, sometimes 70 at the same time. But I think I learned this from you. Actually, I'm pretty sure I contribute this to you. But while speaking, a kid or two may be talking or something, and I like to move around when I talk.
Okay.
So I will go over to them, and I just start talking right over them. and then they look up and they quiet down, and then they start listening, and they're like, you know.
Sometimes
and
that's all it takes.
Yeah, or I just change the tone of my voice, you know, instead of talking louder, I'll talk softer, and then they have to listen a little harder to hear what I'm saying, and they'll stop.
Movement,
stop talking.
changing your strategy,
Yeah.
not being monotone. Sometimes all you have to do is just walk over to the person who's talking and just stand right here and start continuing what you're saying, and they get intimidated and they stop. See, good student. But yeah, that's a great idea, and you work with huge groups.
Two concepts. One, I always try to get the teacher on my side before I even start.
Sure.
Okay, because
Bring them lollipops and Tootsie
no,
Rolls.
whatever. Just, get her on my side. The other thing, what I've said to the kids when they get out of line is, I said, look, I'm not here, so that you don't have to listen to her. And
Which is something you can say to a 5th or 6th grader. So again, it's knowing your audience.
But seriously, getting the teacher on your side before you start, because if the teacher's not interested in what you're doing, you have a problem.
Well, I think Reset's really great about working with teachers who really want us there and who are really enthusiastic about our being there and realize that this is a plus for their class. So we're very lucky in that regard. Thank you.
One thing Reset has is a program called Lead Volunteers. And these are our volunteers that have the most experience in the classroom, have participated in the volunteer training sessions, have had Professor Kohr consult with them on their classroom program. And they help us in a number of ways. One is with our new volunteer training program. If you've seen the videos on our YouTube site, there are 6 training videos. Our lead volunteers prepared those, as well the content and the presentation. And they also have helped when we have new volunteers to observe them in the classroom and on special projects. So I just wanted to take a minute to recognize the lead volunteers who are here today. So Juan Valentine. Woo.
And an awesome sweater.
Unexpected.
Oh, somebody got a picture of the sweater. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And,
Where'd you find that from?
Tom Arpin, you've already heard from before.
Oh, thank you.
Oscar Weigel.
Oh, what?
Thank you, Oscar, for everything you do. Harold Smith. Thanks, Harold. And Sandra Hernandez. So if you're interested in being a lead volunteer, just let me know. I'm not going to ask you to take the time now to fill out the seminar evaluation form you have, because we're heading up to the sushi restaurant for our happy hour. But if you will just take a few minutes, maybe tomorrow or Friday before the weekend comes and we move on to other things, and just fill that out, and you can send me a picture of it, a scan of it, or otherwise just get me the content of it. So, and thank you all for coming tonight. Thanks to all our presenters. They did a great job. And onward to the sushi.
Yes. I really like this large. Demonstrate the paramount.
When you're at the sushi bar and you go to the bar to get a drink, just say to put it on the reset tab. Okay?
I'm kidding.